right. Well, good morning to our morning devotions, and just good to see everybody this morning. And we are in Judges chapter 15, still looking at the life of Samson. I think it's interesting that the Bible gives four chapters to Samson, the life of Samson. Very interesting there. When you consider some books of the Bible are pretty brief, and so the whole just four chapters here given to Samson. We're looking at verses 10 through 20, but let me go over something that I said yesterday because I spoke about the fact that about the consummation of their wedding, and some theologians argue that he left to kill the men before the consummation of the wedding, but the word is wife. The only hesitation I have there is that this is a Philistine wedding, and so when you talk about wife, what a wife is, I don't want we shouldn't read that within a New Testament context. That's all I'm trying to say. And she was his wife, which means although the Bible doesn't say it, and even as I say this, I got to be careful about whether it was consummated because our inclination is because we know who Samson is that we would say of course it was consummated, but the Bible doesn't say it. And I did accent the fact that everything was done properly and in order when it came to his folks, that his dad went down there to Timnath and paid the dowry, and so there was protocol in this, and so that's all I'm saying. I just wanted to say that because as this chapter begins, in chapter 15, this starts a whole nother page for Samson because it says, "But it came to pass within a while after, that is, after the wedding ceremony, it says, in the time of wheat harvest, when it's time to harvest crops, that Samson visited his wife." And I just want you to note this, just so you can add more to some of the discussion in regards to this. Went down to visit his wife with a kid. That is, he brought a gift, all right, of a little goat, which is what people do when they visit. They bring something to give. And he said, "I will go in unto my wife into the chamber." That is, I'm going to go and I'm going to have intimate relationship with my wife. That's what this is all about. And you can either argue that this is going to actually consummate it, or this is just something that's happened since the ceremony. All right, since he was married, however you want to call married. All right, but here's something that compounds it more. She's not living with the best man. She's living with her father, which is why some of the commentators talk about this more like a concubine rather than a wife. And because of the breadth of the word wife, I mean, in the New Testament, we learn of a betrothal and and almost a wife. All right, so much almost a wife that there is a level of divorce necessary to break the betrothal in the New Testament, or actually we're still in the Old Testament there, with the material I'm referencing. But she's not living with her husband that the father gave her to. She's living at home with her father. All right, listen to this. He says, "I will go into my wife into the chamber, but her father would not suffer him to go in." No, you can't, because she's still under my roof. All I'm trying to say, beloved, and I'm probably using too many words, is don't look at this within a New Testament context. That's not what's happening here, all right? So when we look at chapter 16, we're going to see that Samson has a real problem with women, all right? There's no question about that. I'm just trying to say that what's happening so far is a little murky, other than she is called his wife, all right? But the dad won't let her go in. It says, and her father said, I verily thought that thou hast utterly hated her. Now, I don't know if that's what he says, because he left the ceremony to kill the men. You see, one man said he abandoned her at the altar. That would have been like a modern context of what happened here. Well, if that happened, then you understand the complications of here, because the father's saying, well, you didn't even stick around to take her. All right. So that's what he's saying here. He said, but her father said, I verily thought that thou hadst utterly hated her, And then he says, therefore I gave her to thy companion or your best man, but she's not even living with. Okay? All right. This is why you got to study the Bible, because some people just run over this very simply. Okay, and when you start factoring everything in, uh, history is messy. Let's just say that. I write that all the time. That history is messy. When you start reading it, and when you read the Bible, the redemptive historical record gets really messy. All right, but God's given it to us to learn. He says, and then he goes on to say, and listen to this, because I thought you hated her and I gave her to your best man. He says, is not her younger sister fairer than she? Isn't she more beautiful than your bride or your wife? All right. Take her, I pray thee, instead of her. This is the way the Philistines do things. You see, there's virtually nothing binding here at all. No binding element. When we look at marriage, when we talk about these things, these are binding things. With the Philistines, there's nothing binding, and this is what Samson involved himself in. And with that, when he said this whole idea of fairer, then it made me think. If you just go back, and I know I'm not working on this chapter, but if you go back to the last chapter, in chapter 14, what I just skipped over this, where it says, "For she pleases me well." If you look at the original language there, which I looked at again, basically it doesn't mean that I find her attractive. It means that she's suited for a purpose. That's what that means. She pleases me well because she is the right hammer to drive the nail. She is the right ratchet to turn the bolt. That's what it is. It's not that she is that attractive, because she's going to be the means God uses to get him in to kill Philistines. Isn't that interesting? I think it's absolutely fascinating. So the father looks at him and says, "Well, you wanted, you fell in love with my daughter, but she's not really that beautiful." But Samson's saying, "Yeah, but she's going to serve the right purpose for me, according to the will of God's sovereign will." But the father's saying, "Listen, just take the younger daughter. She's more beautiful. She's more fair than your wife." All right, and that's where that story ends. I mean, as far as Samson's concerned, except for the fact that he is furious because his father says, "I can't see my wife." All right. And so we have this in verse 3. And Samson said concerning them, "Now shall I be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure." That is, that you guys have just wronged me. You have wronged me, and I'm about ready to get even. He says, and Samson went and caught 300 foxes, which when I was a kid, I always thought, how do you catch 300 foxes? The Bible doesn't say it, and I'm just going with the text. He catches 300 foxes and puts firebrands or torches between their tails. So I'm just imagining, when I was a kid, I was thinking, how do you tie a fox's tail together? All right. He undoubtedly had a fox. He put a piece of rope around the one fox tail, and then the torch in the middle, and then tied to another fox tail. So he's got the foxes and all of these torches, firebrands, tied between foxes. All right, that's what we're looking at here. Um, and took firebrands and turned tail to tail and put the firebrands in the midst between the two tails. And this is what Samson is able to do. I all I can imagine here is, because the fox is very swift, that his superhuman strength enables him to do this. All right, and and we're in the countryside here in the ancient Near East. So he's catching foxes. He's tying them together. He's catching 300 of them. He's tying them together, and there are torches, firebrands between them. And he says, and when he had set the brands on fire, now when he sets these brands on fire, he let them go into the standing corn of the Philistines. Now remember, what time of the year is this? What time of the year is this? This is harvest time. Everything is full grown. It's about ready to be harvested. So when this happens, when he burns down all their crops this way, this is going to be just a horrible thing. This is going to rob the Philistines of their food supply. This is something that is devastating. All right, because they're going to starve because of this, which is the whole idea. You got to drive the Philistines out of the promised land. He says, and uh, and when he had set the brands on fire, he let them go into the standing corn of the Philistines and burn up both the shocks and also the standing corn with the vineyards and the olives. Everything catches on fire. And it's interesting that some of it is already standing in shocks. It's just before they're going to put it on the wagon or the mule and bring it into the barn. I mean, it's already been harvested, and now everything that they planted, because these are agricultural societies, everything they have is now gone, and the vineyards, and the olive gardens, the orchards, everything's on fire. All right, because of this. And it says, then the Philistine said, "Who had done this? Who did this?" And they answered, "Samson, the son of the son-in-law." And there you have it, the son-in-law, and this is the way the Philistines understand it, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he had taken his wife and given her to his companion. The Philistines know what happened. What happened? The father took the wife, his, and they're calling him father-in-law, all right, and gave her to his companion or the best man, and Samson had it up to here, so that's why this is happening. I want you to see this. This is the way the Philistines render justice. It's just important for you to note this because this is just a cruel nation. It said, and the Philistines came up and burnt her, that is his wife, all right, who's not living with the companion, and her father with fire. They drug him out of the house and set him on fire because of what had happened, because they had lost all of their food supply. This is what they threatened before if you didn't get the riddle, the answer to the riddle. And now, because of what's happened, because you treated Samson this way, so he had this retaliatory spirit, then they just took his wife and took her father and set him on fire, all right, and burned them. And then it says this in verse 7, and Samson said unto them, though ye have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will cease. He says, I'm still going to get even after you've done that. He said in verse 8, and he smote them hip and thigh. And the idea of hip and thigh, this figure of speech, I'm pretty sure this came, I mean, I got to be careful, but I think this is a King James Bible thing that we have adopted. This is ancient. This goes hip and thigh. I have to see how far back in the English Bible tradition we have the hip and thigh. It may go all the way back to Tyndale in like 1516 or 1517, where you get this idea of hip and thigh. And basically, what hip and thigh means is without stopping and overwhelmingly. Without stopping, there was no stopping, and he did it overwhelmingly. That is, when he lights into these Philistines, it's effortless. He doesn't have to stop and take a breath. He just wades into them and overwhelmingly destroys them. And it says this, and he smote them hip and thigh with a great slaughter, and he went down and dwelt on top of the rock of Edom. Then the Philistines went up and pitched in Judah and spread themselves in Lehi. And the men of Judah said, why are you come up against us? So now the men of Judah are wondering, why are all the Philistines camped here? All right. And the idea is that they're come for Samson. And he says, and they answered, to bind Samson are we come up, to do him as he hath done to us. That is, he burned all our crops. I mean, we're just going to destroy him. That's it. We're here to bind him. So the men of Judah side with the Philistines. And this portion of scripture kind of, it always bothers me because they come after the one that's doing right because he's causing them trouble. Because the one that does right causes trouble. When the one that is doing right is the troublemaker, you know that the world is upside down. We see the world a lot like that today. When the one that's doing right is causing trouble. Remember, that's what Ahab said to Elijah. He says, art thou he that troubleth Israel? As if Ahab and Jezebel and the prophets of Baal weren't the reason. No, it's not their reason. It's not the wicked person's reasons. No, it's got to be the prophet's problem. Here it's got to be the judge's problem because he's doing what God called him to do. Everybody else, because they're living in an upside down world, sees the good things being done as the bad things. And I think that's just an important point that we see here again, because that principle is all through the Bible. I mean, this is what they did with the Lord. The Lord did nothing to hurt anyone. All he did was to heal and save, to seek and to save that which was lost, and to heal people. And yet they yell, crucify him, crucify him. You see, there's a principle here that the wicked lay the blame on the righteous. And that's what's happening here when it comes to Judah, because Judah should not be under the rule of the Philistines. They should be worshiping Jehovah, but because they departed from the will of God, they've had this Philistine incursion. This is, as we've seen in other places in Judges. He says, verse 11, he says, then 300 men of Judah went up to the top of Rock Edom and said to Samson, knowest thou not that the Philistines are rulers over us? Don't you know we're slaves to them? Does this sound familiar? They're rulers over us. And you're making waves, Samson. Don't ever side with these 3,000. Oh, but there's one Samson, there's 3,000. Everybody says, yeah, but we got to vote. And when we vote, there's 3,000 to stop Samson. And there's one Samson. And the one guy is right, and the 3,000 are dead wrong. Now, they finally agree to do what Samson says here. But they are so confounded in their mind because their whole thoughts are twisted to think that they are this, God's covenant people. This is the promised land. This is the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Somehow, now they are submissive to the Philistines who, when they want justice done, just burn their own people. Now, I can't get over how backwards this is, all right? So 3,000 members of the tribe of Judah come up as if they're going to bind Samson. I mean, they should know better, but they don't. So here we go. 3,000 men of Judah went up to the top of the rock Edom and said to Samson, knowest thou not that the Philistines are rulers over us? What is that thou hast done unto us? And he said unto them, as they did unto me, so I have done unto them. He said, it's just what they did. I'm just repaying it. You see, but they can't. The men of Judah say, you have brought the fury of the Philistine Empire down on us because of what you've done. Yeah, that's true. Because you guys should be out there killing Philistines as well. There should be an insurrection. There should be a rebellion. And you don't get the drift that I'm the one that's going to lead it, is what Samson would be saying. He said, in verse 12, and they said unto him, we are come down to bind thee, that we may deliver thee unto the hand of the Philistines. And Samson said unto them, swear unto me that ye will not fall upon me yourselves. Isn't that interesting? Sure, you can bind me, take me down, but just don't you kill me. Because that was never going to happen. Isn't that an interesting passage of Scripture? He just wants to make sure his own countrymen don't kill him. And they said, we won't. But that's sad as well. I'm destroying the Philistines. You think I'm bringing this problem down on your head, because of just trying to get you guys in trouble. Are you going to kill me if you buy me? Now, again, that wasn't going to happen. But that sentiment, even in itself, is very sad. So let's keep going here. And they spake unto him, saying, no, but we will bind thee fast and deliver thee into their hand, but surely we will not kill thee. All right. And they bound him with 2 new cords and brought him up from the rock. So there you go. So here he comes. The 3,000 of Judah are coming down with Samson bound with 2 new cords. Oh yeah, this is great. He's walking them right into they're walking right into Philistine territory. This is great. Verse 14. And when he came unto Lehi, the Philistines shouted against him. Yeah, they're cheering. We finally got him. He's been betrayed by his own people. Yeah, he's got no friends. He's got no friends in Judah, and we hate him. And finally, we're going to get rid of this guy, Samson. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, right? So then he goes on to say, and the Spirit of the Lord, here it is again, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. Just didn't come upon him, came mightily upon him. Samson is clothed in the Spirit, came mightily upon him. He's now going to work in the power of God. I just want everybody to get that because he's no saint, but God uses him in a marvelous and mighty way. That's the point. He goes on here. And the cords that were upon his arms were as flax that were burnt with fire. They just came apart like it was nothing, like, tissue paper. That's it. And his hands and the bands loosed from off his hands. And here we have it, verse 15. And he found a new jawbone of an ass. And the whole idea of new here is important because the commentators say that it's new. That means it's not brittle. It's not brittle. It can hold up. It's got to hold up. All right. And took it and slew 1,000 men therewith. And it's 1,000 for sure. But oftentimes in the Bible, things are rounded out. It means at least 1,000, maybe more, probably more. All right. It was a great slaughter that he took with that jawbone. He keeps going here. And Samson said, with the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps. What a picture. Piles upon piles of dead Philistines. Um, with the job of an ass have I slain 1,000 men. And it came to pass when he had made an end of speaking that he cast away the jawbone out of his hand and called the name Ramath-Lehi. And that is where I got the title of this. The idea of this is Ramath-Lehi means the casting away of the jawbone. It also means Lehi just means jawbone. All right. Now I want you to keep that in place. The casting away of the jawbone, Ramath-Lehi. This is what it's called now because this is where that great slaughter of the Philistines took place with the jawbone of an ass. And it says this in verse 18, and he was sore athirst and called on the Lord and said, Thou hast given this great deliverance into thy hand of thy servant, and now shall I die for thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised. And when you read that, I mean, it sounds like a little hyperbole, doesn't it? Uh, he's really thirsty. Sometimes, and this is just my observation, all right, he sounds spoiled, doesn't he? Like he's done his job, and now if I don't get something to drink, I'm going to die. I love my son on this. My son Andrew, he says, just because you're hungry doesn't mean you have to eat. Just because you're thirsty doesn't mean you got to get a drink of water, right? And because we can last a lot longer than our Western uh, sentimentalities will allow us, right? Uh, my daughter-in-law, Andrew's wife, will not let the kids say starving because nobody in America, I mean, nobody in our family is ever starving. We're hungry, right? But we're not starving. All right, God's blessed us and cared for us. I'm not saying there's people that are in tough straits right now, going without food because of the way our economy is, which we trust with the new administration will get turned around. But he's saying that if I don't get a drink of water, I'm just going to perish here. Yeah, that's not going to happen either. But that's his sentiment towards this. He said, and then it says, verse 19, but God clave an hollow place that was in the jaw, and there came water there out, and he had drunk. His spirit came again, and he revived. Wherefore he called the name thereof En Hakore, which is in Lehi this day. Now listen, this I just want you to note here that this whole passage is about a place. En Hakore is in Lehi to this day, and it means the whole idea of the place of the jaw. And and I know I just want you to consider this, all right, this morning, that when it says was in the jaw, the word jaw here in the original means jaw, and it also means Lehi. That is, there is the denotation, which is the proper translation here, which is jaw, but it connotes a place, all right, the place of the jaw as a noun, all right, a location. And I just want you to note here in this passage that when he cleaves out this hollow, which was in the jaw, that there came out water, and then he drank, and his spirit was revived. Wherefore he called the name of the place, therefore, in Hakore, which is in Lehi unto this day. That is, there's a place where this happened. And so I'm just throwing this out. The old Reformation era commentators will go both ways on this, and I just wanted to tell you that some argue, as we would learn, that he hollowed out a place in the jaw that he'd cast away. Remember, he'd thrown this away when he was done with it, and in that hollow, which for me has always been conceptually difficult, in this hollow in the jaw of a donkey, there was water. All right, there's that. Or you look at it, the word jaw here in way of its connotation, which deals with a location. And there are places now in this region in Israel that are called like the pools of Samson, because there in the rock there are streams and pools. And if we were to look at it from that perspective, then he asked for water in one of these pools, and it was there that he refreshed himself. And so the word jaw is exactly the right translation. It's just whether or not we read the word jaw as it's denoted as the jaw, which is perfectly fine, or the connotation of it, which would be this location, which also goes by the name jaw, and this is the location that is spoken of here in verse 19. And then it says this in verse 20, and he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. So for 20 years now, he's taken it to the Philistines after this. All right. And we know he does not drive them out, but he is a formidable person. He judges Israel. All right. And that it doesn't say much more about that. The last chapter here, the fourth chapter in regards to Samson, is in verse 16. And this is where this is where he should not be, where again he should not be here. There's no good thing in this, other than the fact, again, as a result of um, his lack of discipline, to say the least, it leads him to a terrible end, just a terrible end. Um, he's betrayed. I mean, I wouldn't even call it betrayed. He gives it up. He's captured because they cut his hair. They tie him to a mill. First, they poke out his eyes. Now he's blind. He goes from such heights to such humility. This chapter 16 is so sad. They tie him to a millstone and make him grind grain like an animal. And chapter 16 is where he dies. Where he dies. He dies with the Philistines. It's a terrible, terrible chapter. But this is the way God used him to kill Philistines. And because he accomplished that end, he's in the roll call of faith in Hebrews chapter 11. All right. Wow, I think I got a little deep in the weeds on this one, but it gives us something to think about. All right, a little bit more than devotions, but something to think about. All right, something to check out. All right, we should check these things out. All right, so the Lord bless you. What is this, Wednesday? And so tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, which will get us out of the life of Samson. In Judges, there's only 21 chapters. Only 21 chapters, so we're almost at the end of that. And then during the time of the Judges, we have Ruth, which is a great book. All right. All right. The Lord bless you, and have a great day. And we'll see everybody, Lord willing, tomorrow. Okay. We'll see you. Bye.